So we begin by adjusting our motivation, the why behind and the purpose for. I think that's one of the messages of karma. It's not so much what we do, but why we do what we do, which is very much going to determine the quality of the outcome, whether it's just going to be another complicating factor in our life amongst our already probably overly busy lives, or whether it's going to help us to solve some of our more basic problems. So it all comes down to our motivation, which is in terms of the emotional quality behind what we do, whether it's a matter of caring, of kindness, or a matter of jealousy or acquisitiveness, or whatever, leading to a particular valence. What I mean by valence is that our intentions have a quality of either positive or negative quality about them, and this very much determines the final result. The final result of virtue is some type of positive hedonic tone, some type of happiness, basically. And the quality of non-virtue, the final result, when we trace it all the way back, it comes back to an internal feeling that we experience ourselves as the agent of the action, and that is of suffering. So, we can begin to determine the quality of our life. The key to self-transformation is karma, the routine choices that we make in our everyday life determine who we are and who we will become. So, developing some sense of kindness for yourself, we're doing this in order to help ourselves. I don't know if it's for fame or glory. I mean, Buddhism is quite a vast philosophic area of study, and some people treat it as an academic pursuit, but that's quite all right. But over and above that, or more importantly perhaps, is how it affects our lives for the better. And then we're making use of the Dharma I think in a genuine, wholesome way. So if you'd like to, we go for refuge to Buddha, this embodiment of wisdom, love, and compassion, personal strength, personal power, and your skillful expression in our daily life. And we go for refuge to the Dharma, the methods, the means. What it comes down to, I think, is the truth of things, the way things are in their reality. We have to find some way of harmonizing our worldview with the way things actually are, if we were to find peace. And we try, this occurs within the social context of a sangha, a spiritual community of like-minded individuals who are on the journey with us, who can share it with us and share whatever wisdom and experience they have in the course of their life. Maybe share materially, or maybe just a shoulder to cry on, whatever is necessary in helping someone along their particular path at that particular point in their life. And we raise the level of our motivation such that we're not doing it as our general sense of self-interest, but we try to momentarily, and at least in some part, step outside of our I, me, mine concern that generally dominates our life, if only one other person, and trying to expand from that to as many as we can envision in our sense of caring. Okay, so if you'd like to recite together and formalize this notion. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, May I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So we're looking at the Four Immeasurables, Seme-shi in Tibetan. This word se, like a limit. What is the limit? So this is without limits. So we can't quite see how far this joy and this happiness and this wish of love and compassion goes. Immeasurable love and loving kindness, and as I mentioned, I think, and as the Dalai Lama suggests, we emphasize the kindness part. I think that will hold us in good stead. It's less complicated, probably, a beneficial aspect. Immeasurable compassion, the wish that to relieve suffering in all its various forms. And we've looked at those two, and today we're going to look at the remaining two. Immeasurable, empathetic joy and immeasurable equanimity. But before we move on, do you have any comments or questions around the first two, immeasurable loving compassion, loving kindness and compassion? Any thoughts? So you've got those down pat. Okay, good. So we're looking at empathetic joy first. And it's expressed in, the thought, may all beings never be separated from the joy that is without sorrow. May all sentient beings never be separated from the joy that is without sorrow. So empathetic joy, I like to go back to some of the etymology of some of the terms, whether it's in Tibetan or the Sanskrit or even the Pali. I think it tells us a lot about what's behind these notions that we're trying to understand and develop in ourselves. So the Sanskrit and the Pali for empathetic joy is mudita. And so it has this, mudita has its root in a sense of being delighted or pleased, being glad. I think we can identify with these, being glad for somebody. When we delight in happiness of others, we genuinely rejoice at their prosperity or their success or their good fortune, whatever is positive is going on for them. We're happy about that. And we abide in a sense of empathetic sharing in that. It's simply an act of taking pleasure in someone else's well-being. And so it's not something alien to ourselves, something we have to earn or create for ourselves. We already have that quality within ourselves. When somebody that we love is happy, it makes us happy. It's quite natural to our being, as it were, this quality of empathy. And Bill, I think it was last time, we mentioned the distinction, and sometimes the translation is my phone is ringing. I just ignore it. Mention the word sympathy, and as opposed to empathy, and getting a sense of, I think probably in the way that we generally use our language, maybe we use these almost interchangeably. But sympathy has pathy means to feel, passion. Sim means, like in our word, synonymous, means the same. So we feel, in sympathy, we feel the same as someone else. Okay? If they're distressed, we feel distressed. I can sympathize with what you're going through. I'm also distressed. Something like that. We feel together with them. We feel the same as them. So empathy is slightly different. In empathy, we feel into. We approximate a similar experience in ourselves, and we understand, I know where you're coming from. I've been there myself. I understand how you feel. So that's more the quality of what we mean by empathy as opposed to sympathy. I don't know if that's exacting or if that helps in any way to get a sense. So in order to understand and share what another person is going through, we have to get in touch with an experience inside of ourselves that permits us, and imaginatively, to approximate what that person is actually feeling, presently feeling. Specifically, in this case, joy or happiness in some way or another. So in the cultivation, we begin, as we do in the other previous two immeasurables, beginning with someone that we love. It's much more easier if we have some self-interest in the object of our meditation or our cultivation. It's almost, initially at least, it's asking too much of us to be completely altruistic, to separate ourselves completely from our own self-interest. I don't know, maybe I'm projecting my own problems onto you. I don't want to share my neurosis with you. Okay? So we reflect upon and delight in someone close to us, someone that we love, that we care a great deal about. And we reflect upon their delight and experience it empathetically. We enter into that same happiness. I know how that feels. We understand where they're coming from, what they're experiencing. I think I mentioned last week, sometimes when people are down, we talked about the enemy to compassion, or immeasurable compassion, if you like. The near enemy is pity, feeling sorry for someone else. And there's a feeling of self-righteousness, a feeling okay about yourself, and I'm going to help you. The compassion, going back to what we talked about last week, it's not a relationship between a healer and a wounded, but between equals. That's one reason why in the two traditions for the development of bodhicitta, the awakened heart, one, the seven cause and effect precepts, begins with the cultivation of equanimity, and the other, the equalizing exchange of others, begins with a sense of equality, that others are just like myself. They too want to be happy, and that they too don't want to suffer. And it's from that sense of equality that we can most be of service to others. We don't undermine them in our benefiting them, in seeing us as good and themselves as bad in some way. So in the cultivation, we begin by taking in mind someone we're close to, and particularly on occasion when they're experiencing happiness. And we reflect upon the delight that this person is experiencing. And we empathetically enter into that same happiness. We can share in it. Well, I understand where you're coming from. That's really wonderful. I'm glad for you. May your good fortune remain. May it continue. May it, something like that. And then after sharing in the happiness of someone close to us, then we, as any other the other immeasurables, and this is the process that we go through in many types of meditation, we move on to more and more difficult objects, observed objects. And the notion is behind this, in all of this, is that once we are able to, we have the neural pathways, if you like to speak in terms of neurobiology, or the various chemistry of the body and the various inclinations of the mind. Once we begin to open up those, it facilitates simply by the ability to bring on another object, simply by changing the observed object. So it's the same, there's still qualities which remain within the mind and within the body. There's a residual effect, and we're simply as the subject, we simply are changing the object. So we move on from someone that we've able to quite fairly readily develop these qualities of mind and simply shift our focus, change our attention to another object of mind, rather than beginning with a more difficult. Because our mind is as if already primed, as it were, and plus our bodily chemistry is already primed, and our neurobiology is already primed to be able to develop the same qualities of mind in terms of this change, of this new object that we're taking to mind. And then, so we move on to a more difficult object, more difficult, less closer, not immediate member of our family, for example. And we bring them to mind, either actual or imagined. And when, we share in their happiness. It's difficult, we have to use our imagination in terms of strangers, people we don't know very well, but we can imagine situations where they would probably be happy. So in all of this, of each of the four immeasurables, there's what's called the far enemy and the near enemy. The far enemy is that which is the obvious antagonist. As I mentioned, there's some resistance to change in our minds, to change in our attitude, to changing the predominant repertoire of our emotional life. By this it means there's some resistance. And so we have to, what are some of the resistant factors? And it's quite useful to identify those within ourselves. Here, the resistance to empathetic joy is cynicism. So this is the far enemy. That means the obvious, the major impediment. Thinking, happiness is overrated. I don't know if you have it in America anymore. In Australia, there's a common saying, life was never meant to be easy. I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase, or it's just an Australian slogan. It's like pessimism, thinking, don't get used to happiness. It's always going to come to an end. You hear this, don't you? It's not going to last. Don't get too comfortable with happiness. So that's the antagonist to delighting in someone that's happiness. The far enemy. The near enemy, but also hostility. Obviously, it pains me to see you happy. Or jealousy. I don't want you to be happy. You don't deserve to be happy. Or indifference. I could care less whether you're happy. So lots of resistance, lots of obstacles, lots of antagonists to rejoicing in others' happiness. Especially when we get down lower on the scale, it becomes more and more obvious. There are so many impediments to empathetic joy, and our tendency to judge others and discriminate and compare them, to demean them and envy them and be jealous of them. It's because of these deep-rooted self-centeredness that empathetic joy is considered one of the most, it sounds easy, but it's in many ways it's one of the most difficult of all the four immeasurables to cultivate, especially toward more difficult individuals, more down the scale from those we love. So that's the obvious enemy, or the far enemy. The near enemy, by near it means sometimes things are so close to us we can't even see them. These lenses on my glasses, I can't see them. I see through them, as it were. We sometimes see through some of our afflictions. We don't even notice they're there. But, there's an expression, one of my favorite poets, David White, when your eyes are tired, the world is tired. We see through, our ideas, our beliefs, our views are like the eyes upon which we look at upon the world. And we see through those ideas. We see our ideals are the eyes upon which we view the world. So sometimes it's so close to us, we don't even notice they're there. So that's why I said be close. The near enemy, of empathetic joy is not all that bad. It's like frivolity, an over exuberance, overexcited. It's a disturbed state of mind. Wow, that's the most fantastic thing that I've ever heard in my life. I can't, and we're just, we kind of, I don't know. It's really not all that bad, but doesn't have the depth and the benefit of empathetic joy. Also, and this is more subtle. This is also more subtle. There are times when we profess to be glad for someone's happiness, but it may be insincere, it might be hypocritical, or, and this is probably more the case, and this happens quite a lot, when our delight for another is tinged with our own self-interest. When we delight, when we feel that our child has been successful, has done well in school. It reflects well on me as the parent of that child, and that's what we're delighted in the sense that, in fact, you may be delighting in how you appear in the face of others. Oh, her child does so well in school. She must be a great parent, or whatever it might be. Or if our team wins a competition, we might not be so empathetic, delighted in their success as it's my team that won. Maybe a sense of pride in that way, that they're successful. So it's very subtle in that way. So that's how it's quite often explained in the Theravadan tradition. In the Tibetan tradition, Tibetan Buddhism, as you're well acquainted with, places great emphasis on rejoicing. That's another sense of what we're talking about. Taking joy in the skillful actions, the virtue, whether our own or another. Since virtue is seen as the causes of happiness, our skillful actions. Yeah? When we direct it toward others, it's a direct antidote toward the far enemy of jealousy, or the inability to bear the happiness of another. Rejoicing in someone else's virtue, someone else's creating the causes of happiness, someone else's happiness, is a direct antidote to thinking they don't deserve that happiness. I deserve that happiness. The good fortune of another. So as I mentioned, in the Theravadan practice, it begins with someone else. In the Tibetan practice, it's advised that we begin with ourselves. And that is to say, in the sense of practicing rejoicing in our own virtue, in our own creating the causes of happiness, and so forth, in the own good that we do, the kindnesses that we show, the generosities that we display. Looking back over our own behavior and pausing, maybe we don't do this enough. Sometimes we do lots of good over the course of our day, and we just go through them as if nothing happened. It might be useful to reflect upon the day, or it may be back however long. That maybe we helped someone simply out of kindness, or we were generous with what we had, or maybe we were especially patient with somebody, or maybe we forgave somebody with an open heart. So rather than dismissing them as if they didn't happen, or discounting them, said, oh, that's no big deal, that we often do to ourselves. Bring them to mind and recognize we have done something good, and delighting in this. And this delighting, it's simple, basic psychology, reinforces those tendencies in ourselves to repeat them again in the future. That's not rocket science. Yeah, we make a habit of it. That which reinforces, which brings us delight and pleasure. So here we're not thinking, I'm such a fantastic person. That's another near enemy of rejoicing. So maybe self-adulation, a sense of arrogance, maybe in that way. Maybe a conceit. Everything we do, when we congratulate ourselves, it's always not a matter of conceit. Sometimes we have to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt that it's skillful, that it's useful, that it's beneficial. It's just not self-centeredness and narcissism. So just acknowledge the good that we do can be right and wholesome. So this in itself is a direct antidote to self-denigration. I remember when the Dalai Lama first came to the West. Among other things, he was terribly surprised about how the general widespread sense of lack of self-worth, a lack of self-esteem, of self-denigration was present in the West, among other things. Yeah. So, this is by promoting ourselves and paying conscious attention. I don't want to go off on a tangent. Attention is reality. What we habitually pay our attention to becomes our reality. So one way we can begin to change is by adopting new habits of attention, paying attention to what we do right, changes about the story about ourselves and who we are, and thereby who we will become. It's not two different things. So rejoicing is a skillful way to reinforce whatever that is positive in our life that we do. Wholesome actions will come that much more easier in the future. They're facilitated by this factor of reinforcing, by rejoicing, reinforcing. Also, this is more of maybe a doctrinal notion. If you notice that it says, "May they never be separated from the joy that is without sorrow." So historically, I don't know if this is more doctrine than practice, I would say. But anyway, it might find it useful what those words actually mean. There were highly accomplished practitioners who appeared to be free of afflictive emotions. What is termed a foe destroyer or an arhat, someone who has completely abandoned the various afflictive emotions. Most basically, ignorance, hostility, and attachment. So they were looked upon as liberated, and therefore are thought to have attained nirvana, beyond sorrow. In Tibetan, Nyanda means beyond sorrow. That's the translation of Tibetan from the word nirvana. Yeah. So, however, it was noticed that from time to time, some of these individuals, on occasion, they would manifest afflictions, such as attachment. So they were then thought to have degenerated from their liberated state. So for some schools of Buddhism, they developed a doctrine that there were a small category of foe destroyers, of arhats, who could be separated from the state without sorrow, that they could fall from nirvana. And they were called reversible foe destroyers. And this little bit of information in this particular immeasurable is being directed at them. May you never be separated from the joy that's without sorrow. However far you go, may you never be separated from that nirvana. But this is not accepted within the Mahayana tradition. It's a foe destroyer is irreversible. A state, having attained the state of nirvana, can never be degenerated from. Okay, so that's the immeasurable empathetic joy. Any thoughts or questions or comments around that? Okay. immeasurable equanimity. I meant to add, and this is just a little aside, I remember when I first became involved in Tibetan Buddhism, when I traveled overland from the States and ended up in India, and finally ended up in Dharamsala and began to study with Venerable Geshe Nawang Dargay. I had an opportunity to have an audience with Trichang, Kyabje Trichang Rinpoche, who was then the assistant tutor to the Dalai Lama. And this was in my first couple months of having come in contact with Tibetan Buddhism. And I thought I was, back then I thought I was clever. I thought I'd be very clever. And I asked, had an opportunity to ask questions to Kyabje Trichang Rinpoche. And I said, and in my cleverness, I said, what's the easiest way to practice Dharma? And he said, rejoicing. And when I told my teacher, Geshe Nawang Dargay, what I had asked, he said that was a very clever question. So anyway, from a very highly realized master, one of the most simple ways that we can practice the Dharma is rejoicing in the virtues of others when we see it. That will begin to emulate it. What we admire, what we revere, what we hold as worthy of our praise, we naturally gravitate toward. We don't have to force ourselves. It's in the quality of the mind itself. So the fourth of the four immeasurables, immeasurable equanimity. And it's expressed in the wish may all beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for some, and hostility toward others. Sometimes it's, I play around with the words, the translation terms. Sometimes it's worded hatred. I think that's, I think I experience hostility. I'm not saying often, but more often than I do. Hatred would be very unusual for me, I think. But hostility I can identify with a little more readily. So it's the same term, but using it in perhaps a more relevant sense. Another term. So the term equanimity. In Tibetan Buddhist doctrine, it's used in at least three different ways. This term equanimity. It's one of the explanations for equanimity. It's a type of it's a mental factor of feeling. The hedonic tone. There's pleasure on one end and pain on the other end of the spectrum, of this feeling spectrum. In the middle is this term equanimity, or a neutrality, if you like. It's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Another way which the term is used is to, in terms of developing calm abiding. Shine. It's one of the 8 antidotes to restrain from applying an antidote when it's not necessary. When our meditation is going well, not to step back and not apply an antidote. It's the antidote to over-application. When we say, I can improve this, I can make this better, that's probably over-application. So we have to, if things are going well, we have to take a neutral stance and say, allow the meditation to flow as it's presently running. So that's another interpretation of this term, equanimity. The third, and what is meant here, is equanimity is an impartiality toward the three categories. We're always classifying others. We classify the world about us. We're trying to make the world intelligible to ourselves, make sense of the world. So one of the ways we do this is by putting people into boxes, classifications. We judge it, friend, stranger, and enemy. Okay? So here the equanimity is a state free of attachment, hostility, and indifference toward those three qualifications, those three judgments about others. The way that we label others, and then we react to the labels that we apply to others. We have associations built up around them, a history that we bring along to those labels. So what's meant by equanimity is a state free of attachment, grabbing, trying to hold on to our friends, hostility, get rid of our enemies, and indifference, I could care less toward my strangers. So in practice, immeasurable, in the practice of immeasurable loving kindness and compassion, initially we direct these states toward ourselves, and then we extend them to friends, neutrals, and finally to those we feel hostility toward. Here, I think, again, I'll give you some etymology of the term. In Sanskrit, the term that we're translating for equanimity is upeksha. Upeksha. Upa means over. The iksha means to look. It's like the sense that's being gotten at here is we're at a high place and we're looking over. We have an overview. Yeah, equanimity is like climbing a mountain, and we're able to see the lay of the land. We don't get lost in the trees. We see the forest, as it were, the entire situation. So we have a greater perspective from which to view others and what is happening. We're not caught up in the details, as it were. So here equanimity sees others as they are. No one is inherently attractive, no one is inherently repugnant, and no one is inherently insignificant. All are essentially sentient beings innately who want to be happy and don't want to suffer. I mean, this is, and I probably have stressed this is almost what we mean by sentient life. Approach and avoidance. Approaching that which we see as possibilities of enhancing our existence in some way, and avoiding, withdrawing from that which we see as threatening to our existence in some way. That's innate. That quality, that attribute extends equally to each and every sentient being. That's the lay of the land. That's the entirety of the situation. We're all the same in that, whoever they are, whether you label them friend, enemy, or stranger. They're all essentially sentient beings, equally hoping and fearing, equally loving and hating, equally living and dying. We have more in common than we have differences. So equanimity is a state of this even-mindedness toward others. We no longer react in terms of attraction and aversion. So this even-mindedness should not be mistaken for indifference, where others, and this happens a lot, I think. Some people think they're being equanimous, when in fact they've fallen into thoughtless indifference. For example, when we're watching evening news, and we see what's happening in Gaza, or we see what's happening in Ukraine or Sudan or wherever it might be. It's not that we don't care. It's just that we don't will it otherwise. Maybe it touches us, but we don't desire to be otherwise. We don't desire to, in some way, become involved. So this response may look superficially like equanimity, but in fact, it's just a subtler version. I don't want to get involved. We talked about this when we talked about immeasurable love. I was just talking to someone yesterday. Sometimes, generally we talk about the countermeasures to the various afflictions and so forth, but also the impediments, the antagonists, and the opposite. And it's a very subtle notion, but I think it's it might be useful to keep in mind, is that the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. We talked about that in terms of we all have love. What stops us from opening our hearts and letting that love find expression in our daily life in tangible ways? It's fear. So we don't want to get involved. So the far enemy of equanimity is attachment and hostility, in which where the mind seeks to hold on to and avoid. Reject others in some way. So equanimity, however, is like a calm ocean. The mind is completely even. It's not that we're not trying to. I think for some. We're not trying to say that friends, enemies, and strangers don't exist. They do. But they don't inherently exist in that way. I mean, this is I'm taking this that you've been around and you've studied and you've cultivated these notions. It's something very difficult for I think for beginning students to have a sense when we talk about you exist. Friends, enemies, and strangers exist, but none of them inherently exist. Nothing inherently exists. But that's not the way we perceive it to be. We misconceive as if the friend were inherently a friend. That there's something as if something in their very nature coming from their side, independent of my thoughts around them or my view, how I view them. Something very pleasing. They're kind of oozing out attractability. That's their nature. They're inherently friendly. But in the opposite way for the enemy. That's the way that we normally view everything and everyone. It might be useful to be aware of that. So it's not that friend, enemy, and stranger cease to exist. It's that the labels of friend, enemy, and stranger no longer trigger the afflictive emotions of attachment, hostility, and indifference. Our labels aren't just aren't just a simple friend, and they come with a lot of baggage, a complex of associations and history, how we've interacted with others in the past comes along with that label of friend. And when we label someone as a friend and see them as inherently a friend, all those various qualities which come along with that label are seen as inherent to that individual, and we react as if it were in the very nature of that person. But so the question, okay so far. The question is, how do we do that? So it's some people are friendly, agreeable, while others are unfriendly and disagreeable. I mean, that seems to be the case. So it's easy to like some people and not so easy to like other people. We smile at them and they don't smile back at us, or we say thank you and so forth, or we do something for them and they don't thank us back. So it has to be something deeper than all those those cues, those triggers which we're reacting to in terms of their behavior. We have to go beyond the superficial aspects of what it means to be a human being or a sentient being in that way. If we continue to react to people on the basis of superficial appearances, then this endeavor is hopeless. We're never going to develop equanimity. This bird's eye view, this having this perspective. We're lost in the forest, in the trees. Instead we have to repeatedly come back to the very simple but profound truth. Every sentient being innately desires happiness and desires not to suffer. I mean, it sounds like Dharma 101. And it is in a way, but perhaps I know for myself I missed the lesson way back then. And I'm perhaps only learning it now. What the profundity of what was trying to be gotten at and how it can affect your life and your relationships with other people. That very simple fact. Everybody wants to be happy. No one wants to suffer. Just like me. Just like me. I thought I was the center of the universe. I thought I was the most important thing in the universe. I thought there was no one like me in the universe. Until I've spent most of my life in some way. So that's the bottom line with regard to everybody. That needs to be attended to and to deeply be recognized again and again. Every being without exception desires to be happy and desires not to suffer. All of what we do, including the most despicable acts, we do in order to find happiness. We might be terribly misguided, but we were still struggling to be happy. That was our misconceived strategy for finding happiness. It's sad, it's tragic, but it's the case. That was our misconceived strategy to be free of suffering. But that might be sad, but that's the case. It didn't work. And on the contrary, it brought about the opposite of what we were seeking. Nonetheless, we were still seeking it. So we do the things we do, sometimes harmful, sometimes beneficial, but inevitably because we want to find happiness, to be free of suffering. So in this, okay, any thoughts, comments before I feel like I'm going on here? No? Sometimes I feel like a preacher on a pulpit or something like that,
But these are good words to hear, darling, from my point of view, okay?
Okay. So can we affirm the simple basic fact about ourselves and about all others? All the highs and lows, all the ups and downs of our minds and our lives. We have to reach some level of understanding for every being, cut through all the superficial appearance, the superficial appearances of difference amongst ourselves in this respect, not in general. It'd be silly. Not everyone's alike. But in this respect, we're able to see that this is the most essential innate quality of us all shared equally amongst ourselves, and recognize a kindred spirit, a kindred soul, if you know what I mean by that, at the core of everyone. Everyone you're going to meet today, everyone who was on this Zoom call together with ourselves, essentially, you're just like me. We're just like one another in that way. There's male and female, and there's educated and less educated, and whatever the difference in prosperity and geographic location. We all desire to be happy and be free of suffering, and we will, we've been conditioned in our various ways. We're all dependent arisings. We can't get around that. We've all been conditioned in our various ways and have learned various strategies for expressing that basic need of ourselves. Some fortunate and some tragic, some skillful and some unskillful, but nonetheless, it's still there. I'd like to share, I don't know if this is going to be too long. It's a very beautiful poem by and I'm sure you have heard of him. He died just a short time ago, the Vietnamese master Thich Nhat Hanh. He captures, I think in this poem, he captures this understanding. And he was a refugee, a Vietnamese refugee living in Plum Village in France. It was during the time when the North was invading the South. The war was over, and the North Vietnamese were taking retribution against the people of South Vietnam, who they were their previous enemies. And many of them were fleeing the country. They were fleeing in boats. They became known as the boat people. Many of them sailed all the way to some to Thailand, various countries around Southeast Asia. Some of them made it all the way to here in Australia. And it was in this regard that Thich Nhat Hanh wrote this poem, which I'll bring up on the screen. And I hope it's not too long to be read together. And all I have to do is find it amongst. Okay, so this is a poem by Thich Nhat Hanh. So there's a short introduction to the poem itself. Please call me by my two names. I have a poem for you. This poem is about three people. The first is a 12-year-old girl, one of the boat people crossing the Gulf of Siam. She was raped by a sea pirate, and after that she threw herself into the sea. The second person is the sea pirate, who was born in a remote village in Thailand. And the third person is me. I was not on the boat. I was tens of thousands of miles away. But because I was mindful, I knew what was going on in the Gulf. I was very angry, of course, but I could not take sides against the sea pirate. If I could have, it would have been easier, but I couldn't. I realized that if I had been born in his village and had lived a similar life, economic, educational, and so on, it is likely that I would now be that sea pirate. So it is not easy to take sides. Out of suffering, I wrote this poem. It is called Please Call Me by My True Name, because I have many names. And when you call me any of them, I have to say yes. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, because even today I still arrive. Look deeply. I arrive in every second to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird whose wings are still fragile, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosizing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am also the grass snake who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am the member of a Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills up the four oceans. Please call me by my true name, so I can hear all my cries and my laughs at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are but one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, so that the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. I have great admiration for a person who can live those words. It's almost beyond the scope of my mind to take in. Someone who could have that insight into the nature of humanity. Whoever they may be, different causes and conditions have come together to make them who they are and act the way they do. A different environment, a different history, but all this, all of it's in flux, all of it's changing. Had I lived under those same conditions, that would be me. There, but for the grace of karma, go I. The result of this even-minded attitude, there but for conditioning would go I, whoever it might be. It's hard. It's not to say, if people are acting in an erotic manner, if people are doing harm, if people are acting in a mistaken manner, you say stop. But there's no judgment. There's no classification. There's no reactivity. There's hostility, aversion, and so forth. So the emotion of attachment and hostility tend to arise first in reaction to a particular deed, a particular pattern of behavior. This person is really thoughtless. This person is really, really aggressive, hurtful, until we believe that this person is a terrible person. That behavior is an expression of who they are at their core of their being, their nature. And we would believe that about ourselves as well, but that's getting, this is a terrible person. That's their nature. Even if we were to, even if they would exist in an isolation tank, completely insulated from everyone else, they would still be a terrible person. They would still be, but the behavior, whatever our behavior is temporary. It arises in dependence upon causes and condition. I remember once the Dalai Lama said, "This is the slogan of Buddhism," and people had badges, dependent arising. But we don't. It's really a profound notion. If we believe that a person really is inherently terrible based upon observation of his behavior, then we are equating the person with their behavior. If we change the cause of the condition, we change the person. If we judge them by their current behavior, we take a photograph of this person, and this is the way they always are. We freeze them, as it were, in time. We lock them into and equate them with a certain, in this case, negative characteristics. They are, and we feel hostility toward them because that's their nature. We're reacting to that misconception that we're harboring about them, and in the way that we're viewing them. It's as if this person no longer exists if the present behavior doesn't exist. And we do this with ourselves. When we say something, we say, "Oh, where'd that come from?" Wow, we act in an unusual way, and a way that's not particularly routine to ourselves. So, wow, I'm not myself today. We have, we have the sense about predictability about ourselves, and we're pretty consistent in that, in staying with that notion about, in order to develop some kind of secure, coherent identity about ourselves. That's one of the resistances to change, believing that's inherent. But we project that upon the others, and who they might be and their behavior. To equate a person with their behavior is unrealistic, and it's harmful to ourselves and to others. To point a practice is, we can disapprove of a person's behavior without disapproving of the person themselves. We can say stop without hostility. We're of time. I'd like to. So the point is to separate not only the behavior, but the passing mental states from the person. Recognize here a person who is presently afflicted, who are under, are people, but are people always afflicted? No. Do people ever change? Have I ever changed and grown, over the years? It's possible that this person will change as well. And isn't it the fact that beneath all this person's various behaviors and afflictions and that manifest from time to time due to changing causes and conditions, there's someone there that wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer. And they're going to, their strategies which they've learned, as we've learned, some are often unskillful and misguided. We cause ourselves and others suffering. But nonetheless, that desire for happiness and desire not to suffer is always there. So in equanimity, we no longer automatically react to the appearances of friend, these classifications of friend, enemy, and stranger, with attachment, hostility, and indifference. We keep in mind trying to pay attention to a different aspect of them. As I mentioned, reality is what we pay attention to. If we can adopt new habits of attention, we will change how we react to others. This person, if we pay attention to beneath the superficial differences, there's someone there who wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer. Automatically, there's some other way of a new context has arisen between us. Maybe, and hopefully, I think it often is the case, but not always. The very nature of the relationship changes. The other person probably doesn't feel as threatened or defensive in some way, there's a new opening for other possible, deeper, and more meaningful ways of communication. So anyway, I want to explain one thing before we go. And what we've been talking about in terms of equanimity is very much in terms of the Bodhisattva tradition and the Mahayana tradition. I just want to touch on it in terms of the Theravadan tradition. They have a slightly different take on what the equanimity here is all about, and I think it's useful. It's presented from a slightly different point of view. Here, equanimity rounds off and balances the heartfelt wishes of immeasurable love and kindness and compassion. And here, the equanimity is a recognition that things are the way they are. However much we desire things to be different, to be otherwise, ultimately we cannot control someone else's happiness and suffering. It's difficult for us to control our own happiness and suffering, let alone someone outside of ourselves. We're not indifferent. We care. So the indifference is the near enemy of equanimity. But we have to accept. We have to come to the place. I only have so much control. At best, my control is limited, even over myself, my own mind, and what befalls me, let alone someone outside myself. So here, the notion of equanimity is an attitude of acceptance. We're there. We care. We're not indifferent, but we begin to realize we accept the limitations on how much effect and control we have. In fact, we can support them. We can be as kind as possible, as understanding as possible, but within those limitations, we have to accept. It doesn't do us any good to become stressed out ourselves. It doesn't do the other person any good or ourselves. So this is borne out in the very last page of. I'll bring it up very quickly. So here, this would be the kind of the climax of the prayer of the sense of equanimity within the Theravada tradition. All beings are the owners of their karma. Their happiness and suffering depend upon their actions, not on my wishes for them. I think that's a pretty it's a pretty difficult way, notion to accept, especially when it's for someone who we're very attached to, who's going through difficulties. But it doesn't. If we can have a sense of equanimity, perhaps we can be of greater service. We can access our own wisdom, practical wisdom, in being able to bring about the change in situation. If we fall into stress along with them, if someone's in difficulty, then we're not going to be of any great service to them. We have to be able to step back and see the situation, as in this notion of equanimity. So here, the far enemy of immeasurable equanimity is clinging to our demands that things must be the way that we want them to be, and thereby succumbing to anxiety. That's what we get. That I know I get. Things shouldn't be like this. That's unrealistic. That's wishful thinking at best. Shantideva, a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. Why be upset about something if it can be remedied? And what is the use of being upset about something if it can be remedied? So our being upset doesn't help. That's where equanimity comes in. I don't know if you're familiar with this prayer. This is made use of in the Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12-step program. And I think it also expresses a sense of equanimity. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That wisdom to know the difference is quite a challenge in itself. We said in the Sanskrit of equanimity is upeksha, to look over. So we have a greater perspective from which to view things. And therefore, I think we can be of greater service to others from that point of view, from that perspective. And I think that's one of the underlying notions within this particular interpretation of equanimity. It doesn't mean that we don't care, that we do, and we should. But we choose to open our hearts and offer as much kindness and support as we can. But important, we let go of our unrealistic demands that the results must accord to our demands, that things must be the way I wish them to be. Okay, so yeah. Okay. So those are the four immeasurables. Immeasurable loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. So I hope any thoughts or I'm looking at that. Any thoughts or questions that you want to, anything you want to bring up before we sign off together? Jai in South Australia. No?
Thank you. Look, this is idiosyncratic to me. Yeah, I was surprised because I've asked around, all right? I was shocked to discover something I had always assumed was that, because I have a problem with anger. When you're upset with somebody, I mean, really, really upset, the desire to kill, I thought that was just everybody had it, but apparently not. Um, so is there any Buddhist advice about somebody like myself? I don't act on it. I'm very proud of that. Okay. And I haven't even done physical harm to anybody, but the desire is just so strong. So I'm wondering what a Buddhist approach to handling that would be. Because I can't, I mean, I do some work, obviously. And like I said, I'm very proud of the fact I've never acted on that desire, but I don't really know how to quell it. So just wondering what input.
Okay. I mean, with I guess beginning with in general, all of what we call afflictive emotions. This is a class of emotions, which includes attachment, hostility, jealousy, pride, and on and on. Within the perspective of Buddhism, they're all wrong, what are called wrong consciousnesses. That they're wrong in the sense that they all are exaggerating the nature of their object in some way. In terms of hostility, it's the nature of the negativity of the object. So, it seems as if how much time? It seems as if a great deal of Buddhism, the underlying theme is bringing our minds in harmony with the way things are. I think I even mentioned that almost at the very beginning. Okay, so we want to know, in order to bring our minds in harmony with the way things are, we have to know the way things are in a true fashion. Sometimes I think Buddhism is like truth therapy. It's the truth which will make you free. Coming to recognize the way things actually are. So people so the afflictive emotions are all based upon an exaggeration, a superimposing of an exaggerated characteristic about those way things are. In terms of hostility, we exaggerate for one thing, we exaggerate the negativity of this, what we're seeing in this person. So, can you bring your mind to a more? They're all inappropriate. None of them are rationally warranted. in terms of the actual nature of their object. Now, some you might not this. I don't know. Jai, are we communicating as we go along here?
Yeah. No, we're good. We're good. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm bored. Yeah, I put down the gun. We're good.
I'm glad we're online.
Okay. Yeah. Bill is too, I think, by the sound of it. Yep.
So, and okay. So, for one thing, we're superimposing a negative quality on that person, which is rationally not accepted. So, one way we can begin to is to analyze: is this person as bad as we are presently conceiving them to be, or are we exaggerating in some fashion? Okay, so we're kind of dismantling or deconstructing this badness that appears around this person. They're not as bad as we think. And what is the nature of your projection upon them? This person that you want to I find it that you want to kill. Yeah. What is it so bad about them that you need to destroy them?
Oh, they do bad things to other people.
They do bad things to other people.
Oh, goodness me. Yes. Yes. Oh, look, trust me, the ones I have in mind totally deserve it. Um, there's no question. The best technique I have found for me is if I can, and it's not my first response, so I have to think about it. The best technique for me has been to imagine myself as their parent. And how would that, it's like I have an enormous amount of patience for children, and
With
they
with
make
with
mis-
who? With
with
who?
children.
Okay.
Yeah, I can extend patience to children. I can't say I've ever met one that I wanted to murder. Um, so it's like, and certainly, I have dealt,
Okay.
you know how it is as a parent, there are things they do, they drive you mad. But you have so much of an empathy and a love for them that you overlook it. And there is also the consolation that eventually, I have faith, they will learn, they will wise up themselves. And if I
So
can extend that to others that I'm upset about, they're making a mistake currently, but at some point they will fix it.
so you don't you mentioned that you don't see children in that same way. Would you don't hold them as responsible as an adult for their actions?
Correct. Yes, I think
Why
that's
is
fair.
that? Why is that? What is the difference between an adult and a child in terms of responsibility?
Um, Wisdom. No opportunity for wisdom yet. That would be the
Okay,
difference.
so they haven't developed the wisdom through life experience.
Correct. Yep.
So does everybody develop wisdom through life experience, or are some people less and some people more?
Well, obviously, quite a few people less.
So these people who have developed less practical wisdom over the course of their life,
Yeah.
they're not quite as responsible. They're almost as responsible or lack responsibility in the same way a child, to some degree, does.
Yeah, no, I have a hard time with that. It's like as adults, I feel like, and particularly some of the ones that I think of, have had plenty of opportunities to gain wisdom and just haven't taken it.
Do you
So
take advantage? Do you take advantage
that's
of every opportunity that you have?
well, when it comes to wisdom, yeah, I work really hard on it, mate. I really do.
So I don't know. There's we got 1 minute. I'll just
I'll be
what you
quiet. Oh,
what you're talking about. Oh, it's not going to be there anyway. No, I was thinking about the verse from. There's a verse from. I thought I had it there, but perhaps I don't. From A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva, where he says, that if someone were to hit you with a stick, Jai, if someone were to hit you with a stick, why don't you get angry at the stick, since that's what's hurting you?
Yeah, I know the theory.
You know that one?
I know the theory. Yeah.
So, what's the theory?
Well, okay. That, let's see. Well, I guess I know it from the point of view, for me, it's like, it's the wielder of the stick that I have a problem with.
Okay,
So the stick itself obviously is okay. The stick doesn't have a choice. The wielder has a choice in the matter.
so the will, the person who's that which is in control of the stick is responsible.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so when a person is uh, if a person is maybe overcome with I don't know what all these people you want to kill do, but maybe they have attachment or lust, or maybe they have hostility or whatever. When they're under, are they at times under the control of a craving or?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So so why don't you get angry at that at their anger, at their craving, at their
Yeah, logically, I see what you're saying, but I still go back to the fact that they have choice in the matter.
Do we have I don't mean we're out of time, but we're almost out of
Yeah.
time.
And there's a couple more questions. So I'll go
Yeah.
away and do more contemplation and much more restraint, of course. Thank you. I've really appreciated the input. Thank you.
No, well, okay. Um, Any final comment?
Phil has a question, and so does Barbara.
Okay, sure.
Mine may be hopefully short, but the four immeasurables, the third one, empathetic joy and rejoicing, it kind of surprises me because in almost all of the Buddhist teachings and readings that I've gone through, you might hear mention periodically of gratitude and expressing gratitude, but rejoicing hardly ever shows up. And I'm just wondering why this. And we focus a lot on samsara and loving kindness and so on, but rejoicing again hardly ever shows up in the teachings. Is that your,
Really,
or not just imagining that?
that was the behind what that was one of the first, as I mentioned, from teachings that I received from Trijang Rinpoche was the fact of rejoicing. It's I don't know. It was mentioned quite a lot. What we, I guess, as I mentioned, it's quite what we admire, what we look up to. If we see someone creating the causes of happiness and so forth, virtue, there's a natural tendency toward emulating that. I think we have to discriminate in what we rejoice in. Like maybe Jaya could rejoice in the failure of their enemies, or the suffering of their enemies. So I mean, rejoicing can be directed in negative fashions, but yeah, rejoicing has been something which has always been there for me in terms of the teachings, but hopefully to some extent in my own personal practice.
Okay.
Rejoicing, taking joy in, admiring, respecting.
Barbara?
Jay, mine is the other side of your coin. Mine is painting, superimposing everything with positivity, leading to attachment.
Oh, no,
And
superimposing. You mean
superimposing
exaggerate?
positivity, but that leads to attachment for me. But how I live my life is I see what I look for.
You see what you look for. Okay.
So
What
if
are you looking for? What are you looking for?
so if I look for goodness and kindness, that's what I'm seeing. I see what I look for.
Okay, and you don't see anything that you're not looking for.
Well, I mean, sometimes I do, to say that I don't, but my focus is always giving situations the benefit of the doubt. Again, painting, superimposing positivity on things, positive things.
Well, why do you think it's necessarily superimposing?
Well, because then it leads to attachment.
To-
I'm having a real challenge with attachment these days.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Defining and knowing where that line is.
Which line?
The line of looking at people, situations in a positive way, but then just stopping it there and not wanting more of that positive situation or that positive person or that's where my struggle has been.
So attachment exaggerates the an attractive aspect of the object, okay, and wishes to possess it,
Yeah,
okay. So
maybe not possess seems just a little bit strong,
okay.
but become closer to it. Like you were talking with Jay about superimposing negativity on people and situations, and
So,
I do just the opposite.
but you're taking the fact that there is positive events, positive people, situations in the world, aren't there? Aside from your superimpositions around them. I mean, I'd like to become closer to the Dalai Lama. Is that do you see anything wrong with that?
Well, you know what? I don't. And see, this is where I'm kind of having a little bit of a struggle. It's just kind of knowing where that line is, knowing that doesn't seem like attachment to me at all.
So what's the difference?
I guess maybe it goes back to what is the definition? What is attachment?
So exaggerating the attractive aspect of the object and wishing to, or desiring, an inordinate desire to possess it or control it or own it or
So maybe the key
maintain.
phrase is inordinate desire.
The exaggerated desire, the exaggerated attractiveness. Okay. So it's something beyond what is actually there. I mean, there are attractive things in the world. There are unattractive things in the world. There are certain things that we put on our kitchen table and certain things that we put in the toilet. This is a matter of social convention. There's beauty and ugliness in the world, but if we tend to exaggerate that, superimpose an estimation about something beyond what is actually there, then it becomes problematic. Would you say there's beauty in the world?
Absolutely. I see much more beauty than I see not beauty.
Well, you're fortunate in that. Remember we talked about attention is reality? You have a routine, you have a habit of paying attention to what is beautiful. I think, I mean, I'm not saying you're, say, what do you call that, Pollyanna.
No,
You're probably not naive.
no, I don't
Yeah.
consider that I am. But again, how I live my life is I see what I look for.
You see what you look for. I think that there's something to be positive. There's something very positive around that. If you look for the best in people, you'll
Yeah,
find
that's what
it.
I'm going to see.
If you look for the worst, I could live in a neighborhood full of Buddhas, and I could find fault with my neighbors.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So we find what we look for. We're predisposed to see. It's like what we're going to find is kind of already determined. Oh, we'll keep looking until we find it. So I think if you're not being Pollyannic about it, if you're not being, I don't know what the other words, naive about it, seeing the positive in others and seeing positive in the world, I think is admirable. As long as this positivity is not exaggerated, something beyond what the general estimation of what is actually there. Don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I do.
You're lucky. A lot of people see only the black, only, they see their world through a glass darkly. They see negativity wherever they look. I'm not saying you're naive, I'm not saying you're Pollyanna, but if you see more good in the world, you're fortunate.
That's what I look for.
So this is like Thich Nhat Hanh. He sees someone who doesn't have a pirate who hasn't opened their heart. He sees something deeper than just someone who's caused a lot of harm. He would say stop. I'm sure if he was on that ship, he would probably do whatever he could to stop.
Thank you. Lots to think about. So much to think about.
I think you're doing great. Give yourself credit.
I'm going to rejoice.
Good on you. I rejoice. I think we should all rejoice in all of what we're doing. And I'm sorry I've kept you over. I apologize. And before we dedicate, any final comment? Michael, Bill, Zella, Alice. Okay. So this is verse from a dedication from the Shantidev's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which I like very much. So I admire you, all of you, in your practices and what you're seeking to achieve. I think it's very inspiring. Thank you for that. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, attain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drink. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powers find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. So, thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts about the Dharma. I think it's there's a line by the philosopher Spinoza. What is rare to find is rare to realize, and I think it's rare to find the Dharma, and it's rare to find the opportunities to share it in these meaningful ways with others. So thank you for that. Be well.
I have